Now, we found out yesterday through the reporting of AL.com that Alabama basketball superstar Brandon Miller allegedly brought the gun used in the Tuscaloosa strip killing of a woman that led to capital murder charges for his now former teammate Darius Miles and 20-year-old Michael Buzz Davis, according to law enforcement testimony. Now, the article then lays out how Miller allegedly brought the gun in his car close to where the shooting happened after Miles supposedly texted Miller to bring it. That same article then goes on to say that Miller's car, according to allegations, plus another car, were actually blocking in the Jeep of the victim before the shooting. Now, the Tuscaloosa DA, who just happened to graduate from Alabama's law school, said there's nothing really to charge him with. And now, look, I'm not a lawyer, okay? I'm not going to sit up here and pretend to be one. But if that isn't a crime by law, how in the hell does it not at least warrant a suspension or something from Nate Oats and Alabama basketball? Now, we've heard Nate Oats talk about the hard hat mentality and about how great culture works or what holding people accountable means and why Alabama's risen to where they're at. Well, it seems that his words were only that, just words. After knowing the information that we all know now, Nate Oats still chose to play his best player regardless of living up to his mantra of accountability. Now, we hear coaches talk all the time about doing the right things and how their program builds young men up. Well, it seems that Nate Oats really only cares about one thing when it comes down to it, and that's winning. Now, I know people will say, well, it isn't against the law, so why should he have to sit? Well, I have news for that crowd as well. Most player suspensions aren't because they broke a law. Being late for practice isn't against the law. Missing class isn't against the law. Hell, making bad grades isn't against the law. And those pale in comparison to this situation. But at most places, there are consequences for actions, regardless if they were lawful or not. There is also no way in hell that you can convince me that someone bringing a gun to a place where they know there is a conflict is totally oblivious to what may happen with said gun. I just wonder if this was someone who wasn't a superstar and a future lottery pick, how they would be faring right now under the same circumstances. Now, Nate Oats then went on to make comments about you can't control what kids do outside of practice. And he isn't wrong. But guess what you can control, Nate? You can suspend them. You can do the right thing. Now, I would say the same thing about Bruce Pearl if it were Auburn or Kentucky if it was John Calipari. It doesn't matter. Some things are bigger than basketball. Some things are bigger than rivalries or your team, and some things are bigger than sports. And this is definitely one of them. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I do know that this should have warranted some action by the team at least, not just sweeping it under the rug. We're losing college sports already with all the changes and telling players it's okay to quit and transfer the minute you face adversity. And if we lose the last moral fiber of what it means to play college sports, then we will truly lose college sports forever. And that's something I can't stomach. I want to bring in co-host David Cohn. I know you have some feelings about this. My other co-host Blaine Crane as well. Guys, I want to start by saying that this has nothing to do with where this happened or what team that it is. And Nate Oats is not the only coach in the world who doesn't practice what he preaches when it comes down to affecting winning. We all know what makes the bottom line, and that is winning. Why did Nate Oats get that extension? At a very interesting time, now that you look back on it. Because he is winning and bringing money and success to Alabama basketball. But there are some things, like I said, David, that go beyond the final score. And I don't think for the rest of time, and right now it may not even matter, but if nothing happens with Brandon Miller, how can Nate Oats ever get up on at a press conference again or in a living room and say, you know what, I really do have your son's best interests in heart. We really do have a great culture here at Alabama when it comes down to how we handle ourselves off the court. It comes down to being hypocritical, because that's when you find it. You don't find out when it's going good, if somebody's really about what they say. You find out when it's going bad and it can have a negative effect. That's when you find out who people really are. Well,
this is certainly a dark cloud over Tuscaloosa right now. And even if Alabama were to go on and win the SEC in basketball this season or go on and win the NCAA championship, this would have this would be tainted to some degree, even if Brandon Miller is not charged with a crime moving forward. Now, you touched on some good points on there. I want to talk about the legality of this first. I, too, am not an attorney, but I did have to pull out legal concepts you should know last night, written by my father, Papa Cone. It's essentially, we're talking about mens rea here, which means guilty mind, which comes down to 4 different states of mind: purposeful, knowing, reckless, and negligent. So the question is, what did Brandon Miller know, and when did he know it? Or better yet, what could a prosecutor in court prove to a jury that a reasonable person should have known? An example of that is, did Brandon Miller at any time ever know, say, the weapon he brought was unlicensed or unregistered? That's an important piece of information. Did Brandon Miller at any time know that there was any animosity between his teammate, Darius Miles, and the alleged victim? That's a piece of information. And then obviously you get up to the level of, did Brandon Miller ever know, or should a reasonable person have known, that this gun was going to be used to commit a crime? That's obviously would be like the most difficult to prove in this situation. But again, to your point, let's just put the legality aside. Let's just say Brandon Miller had no idea. You know, he was taking a weapon that belonged to a teammate to his teammate, had no idea what it was going to be used for. He was just to use Oats in the wrong place at the wrong time, something like that. Still, how do you not look into it further if you're the head basketball coach and say, you know what? Star athletes, whether professional or collegiate, need to be held to a higher standard. Because if we're not going to do that moving forward, we have to stop idolizing star players, in my opinion.
Yeah, and again, you talk about putting the legality aside. If Oats would have said, you know what, Brandon, and everybody else that's involved in this, or anybody in the situation, until I find out more information on this, you are suspended right now. Because it is that serious. It is that important, and it transcends sports by so much. There's a 5-year-old right now that doesn't have his mother because of this. And I'm not saying that it's solely on one person or anything like that. But events had to happen for this event to happen. One of those events was allegedly a gun being brought to a place where you knew there was conflict. That there's a reason you're not bringing a gun at 1:30 in the morning to a place where you know it's conflict, thinking that you're just going to sit there and play hooks and ladders, in my opinion. Now, that's my personal opinion. Not a lawyer, not going to try a case. But as a coach, if there's any question in the involvement in a murder, you sit the player. You sit the player. And sometimes I think that coaches get drunk on their own Kool-Aid so much that they think they're basically untouchable, or that they can make something like this just go away. It's not going away now. It's here to stay. If you would have suspended him, Blaine, for a couple games and then came back and said, all right, this information is out, Brandon Miller was suspended for 4 games, they're not going to do anything legal to Brandon Miller, therefore we are going to reinstate him and let him play. That's one thing. Yeah, but you did nothing. You did nothing. Then you come out in a press conference and say wrong place, wrong time?
You had time.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Well, the thing about it is, like, what did Brandon Miller know, right? Did we know that he knew there was conflict, right? Did we know that? Are we 100% on that? Because if he didn't, I mean, obviously it's just completely oblivious to the situation.
I'm going to bring up the article.
On. If we know that he did not know there was conflict and he was bringing that to somebody who owned that property, then it gets down to, if you're the coach, what gets you fired as a coach these days, right? Doesn't matter how many people you graduate or this or that, it's winning games. I mean, doesn't get you fired. It's winning games, right? And Oats, at this point, one, I can't believe this went this far without getting broken into the news. Amazing that it got this far. So if you can't charge them with anything, right now, the police, you have testimony from the police, you have the DA who says they couldn't charge them with anything, you have the SEC who's probably looking into it now. Right now, what do you suspend them for? Like, what can you put on the dotted line? You're suspended because of this.
By an ongoing investigation into whether your involvement in the murder.
Well, they looked if he was involved or not, and they said there's nothing they can charge him.
Again, the law, that's the violation of team rules. Because you don't break the law doesn't mean that there's not something going on or that you suspend a player. Sharif Cooper at Auburn, this is a totally different situation, got suspended because his dad was a bad guy.
Yeah.
For a season.
But what team rule do you suspend Brandon Miller for?
Well, there needs to be a blanket code of conduct. I
Yeah,
think.
it's violation of team rules.
At least until you have more information, because now you're playing catch up. Now that
That's the biggest problem.
The information has been revealed. Now it looks like even if you do something at this point, that you're just reacting to the public pressures rather than a sense of integrity.
Here's the part, and this goes to the AL.com article. This is another thing. All right, this is straight from the AL.com article. Miles and Davis walked away from the victim's Jeep but later returned. 2 vehicles, a Dodge Charger and a Dodge Challenger that belonged to Miles' teammate Brandon Miller and the Jalen Bradley kid were blocking the road where the Jeep was parked. That's another part of this.
Mm-hmm.
Like this, again, there's so much that we're kind of finding out.
That could mean so much.
Oh, it could mean so much.
But what I found interesting wasn't there a piece of that of the officer testimony that said Brandon Miller's windows were shot out?
Yeah, because on the return fire from the
that should at least tell you he's close enough. He's in the vicinity of the shooting. Now, Jake, here's an interesting point that I was going to ask you, because a basketball team is made up of a smaller number of guys than, say, a football team or some other sports. So if you had a situation, because at this point that's 3 Alabama basketball players. There was another kid there too, right?
Yeah.
From the team. Mm-hmm. If you have a situation where, a lot of guys are grouped together, out hanging out, 10, 15 players from the same team, and then a situation like this were to break out, are you in a position as a school then where you have to shut down the entire basketball season while an investigation goes on?
Again, I think it's all circumstantial. If Brandon Miller had just been out and somebody got shot around, that's a totally different thing, in my opinion. If he had just been out, but Miles messaged you, whatever, allegedly, to bring his gun at 1:30 in the morning to a corner where there's a conflict because he said, quote unquote, somebody's in here faking or whatever. So bring me the gun. Bring me my strap. And then that gun is used that same night to the killing we all know, with the poor woman who was killed. That's totally different to me. But the catch-up part to you that you said to me is 100%, because now, because typically the cover-up's worse than the crime, right? In a lot of cases, the cover-up's worse than the crime. So now if you say, all right, Brandon Miller, you're suspended, you admit you were wrong. You basically admit saying, oh, well, we should have done something at the time. That, like you said, now it's reactionary. Mm-hmm. That's half the problem. That's why you get out in front of these things and say, you know what, against Vanderbilt right now, for the time being, Brandon Miller is suspended for this game with the possibility of being reinstated due to a violation of team rules. You don't have to say because there's a pending investigation. Mm-hmm. You don't have to say because, well, this information just came out. You get ahead of it because now you're saying, look, we did our due diligence. We suspended him. There's nothing against the law. If you want to take that route, you want to say, well, morality-wise on the team, he's not going to be suspended anymore after this. That's one thing. But you did nothing. You did absolutely nothing, said nothing, and then when it came out, you tried to sweep it under the rug like it was nothing. Nate Oates' comments yesterday makes this look even worse with the way that he put it, in my opinion. We want to see what you think in the comments and in the Booster Club as well. All right, let's get to the Booster Club. This ought to be interesting.
Caden Gibson. All right, what's up, Caden? Says, suspend him 5 games so he misses the SEC tourney and the first round of the NCAA tourney so he doesn't really miss any important games, but it looks like they discipline him. That's a route they could have taken.
That's a route they could have taken, but think about it. You could have gotten that out of the way already. Like you, and I hate looking at this through a prism of how can we make Brandon Miller's sentence, less severe enough where it doesn't affect the basketball team. But now what I think you're going to see happen, all right, because Alabama plays tonight. They play South Carolina. Now, since you did nothing, if they suspend him, it's probably going to be for the rest of the year. And I know Clay Travis then came out and said he didn't think Brandon Miller's going to play any more basketball for Alabama. To be honest with you, now that it got swept under the rug at the beginning, the course of action now is it's almost kind of who knows. But do you try and cover your ass now and suspend him the rest of the season and say, look, we do care more about people than basketball. You've put yourself in a bad situation. You're almost damned if you do and damned if you don't. That's why you get ahead of this thing. That's why you stick to the clauses that you talk about and accountability and you practice what you preach. It's just a tough situation.
Here's another thing. If Brandon Miller, the star player on your basketball team, was involved in the situation enough that his windows allegedly of his car were shot out, he was close enough in the vicinity like we talked about, and had something to do with the transportation of the weapon, If Nate Oats at least knew that much because the police department during the investigation knew that much, then you have to know one thing. That information is going to come out. So if you know that information is going to come out because this is a star basketball player, how do you not have a better statement
That's my whole thing,
for
David.
your justification of him playing the last few weeks? Because Nate Oats could have come out yesterday and said something to me, I don't know how you spin this situation to justify a kid playing under these circumstances, but he could have done better than what he said.
Yeah, it was, and then he came out and remember he had to clarify what he said. He put out a statement. Him and Alabama put out a statement saying, "Well, I didn't use my words correctly." But how are you not more prepared? You act like you got shocked that this came out. It's 2023, man. You can't hide anymore. And look. The control that Nick Saban in Alabama has in the football realm is totally different than what Nate Oats has in the Alabama realm. It's not even close when it comes down to it. There's stuff that you can hide. Not saying that Saban could have hid this, but Saban's got a lot more pull in football than you do in basketball. You wonder if the athletic department got a little, not confused, but a little bit overconfident on stuff they'd be able to hide. But
again, I have a hard time believing that.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying, David. That's why it's so crazy. That's why it's so crazy to me how you weren't as prepared. But I want to say this too. And people say, oh, well, you're an Auburn fan, so you just want Alabama to do bad in basketball. No, I want people that are involved in a murder case to be held accountable, like we're seeing with Darius Miles and this Buzz Williams guy. But also, I want college sports to still be somewhat like college sports. I want sports to mean something. I want it to, when you go play at a place like in Alabama or in Auburn, or you play a college sport, the one that we love, it's about more than just scoring points and doing other things. That's what we're devolving into in the college sports now. So if you're an Auburn fan or an opposing fan that likes this because it means Alabama's going to do bad or anything like that, you're wrong. You're just as bad as the Alabama fan that loves their team so much that they'll defend anybody over anything and they'll expand their moral clause to be able to fit whatever their team fits. You're both in the wrong. Your priorities are both messed up. This is about an individual situation at a school. It could happen at any school. It could happen in Alabama. It could happen at Tennessee. It could happen at Texas. It just so happened to happen at Alabama. So if you're one of those people, because I can already feel it, in the comments or the chat to say, oh, well, you just hate Alabama, or somebody that's defending Alabama because you love Alabama, you're wrong, and you need to grow up a little bit. Hey, YouTube, do us a favor real quick. If you're enjoying the content, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and go ahead, get your Quasimodo on. Ring that bell so you can find out all the times when our content's dropping.